All right, everybody, welcome to the main stage here at the Boston Marathon Expo. We are now joined by our 1976 Boston Marathon champion, Mr. Jack Fultz. He is the man when it comes to all things running, has been involved with the sport for several decades now, and is still deeply, deeply involved with the Dana-Farber Marathon Challenge team, which we'll get into, and is a big-time veteran of running races all around the world, but has 6 Bostons under his belt, and we'll get into all of them. Jack, how are you doing?
Good morning, TK. I'm doing very well, thank you. And thanks a lot for having me. And how are you doing?
I'm all right. We're hanging in there as best we can with our first ever virtual Boston Marathon week. How's everything going for you as we go through this pandemic here?
Well, we're kind of reinventing the wheel, so to speak, just as you are and everybody else is to a very large degree. So far, the spokes are meeting the rim, and the wheel, as we are reinventing it, is being built as successfully, I think, as we could anticipate doing so, to use that as a metaphor. But for us, in terms of my predominant involvement, of course, with running now is coaching the Dana-Farber Marathon Challenge team, and I have some individuals I work with as well. But and the bottom line is the bottom line, as I mentioned to you earlier, in terms of for us, it's about fundraising and giving our team members the highest quality marathoning experience they can have. But I remind them very early each year that while they thought they joined a marathon team and they had to raise money for that, they actually joined a fundraising team and they get to run the marathon as a reward for that. So it's simply a cognitive shift in terms of thinking of your participation in this thing. And so they're the two segments, of course, and not just for our team. I think we represent all the charity teams anyway, running, that there's their physical training for the marathon, and then there's the fundraising. And we lace the two of them together as best we can so that they're one and the same for a host of reasons, not the least of which is some people, there's no guarantee when you start out that you're going to be able to actually run the marathon. Injury, illness, those things set in, and some people just don't get to run it after doing all the work. And for the experience we've had with people who experience that is that they're very concerned that they now can't go ask their potential sponsors to support their fundraising as part of the Boston Marathon or any race if they now were not going to be able to run the race. So that's a little gymnastic we have to do to get them again to appreciate that they're still part of the team, whether they can run or not, and build on all of that. So we pulled some of that stuff out also to deal with this new reality that we have, that people are having quote unquote virtual experiences in terms of running Boston in September now. More of our runners on our Dana-Farber team are choosing to do the virtual race than I thought would. So, for whatever reasons, probably a host of different reasons, but it's great to see that they are. So I believe 60 to 70% of our large team are going to run the virtual marathon sometime in September.
Yeah, I believe there's more than 20,000 people signed up to be a part of the festivities, and we certainly welcome them here to the Boston Marathon Expo, and to hear from you, Jack Fultz. So you grew up in Pennsylvania. You were the 6th of seven kids, if I'm not mistaken. Everyone played sports, including you. And eventually you found your way into running, and eventually to Arizona, right?
That's right. Yeah, I was, I played football, basketball, and ran track. We didn't have cross country then. But I was, 3-sport athlete, as again, everybody is in these small towns across the country. I think if you're an athlete at all, and I'm the youngest of the 4 boys in my family. And so my 3 brothers were all good athletes, and they all sort of set the family legacy in this small town, 9,000 people in northwestern Pennsylvania, small town industrial that has completely changed like all the other small industrial towns across the country and whatnot. But so growing up there, for me, in being in high school, you had to show up and put up. And because I was too small to be tremendously successful in basketball and football, not fast enough or tall enough to be that good in basketball, but I loved it. Basketball was my favorite practice of the 3 sports. But track was where I excelled, in large part because I delivered newspapers every morning from 4th grade on. And so I got an hour aerobic workout every morning, 6 mornings a week, year round. And in the wintertime, I'd do it on foot and pull my newspapers on the sled or something like that. So I was exercising every morning aerobically, and I just thought I was delivering my newspapers. Little did I know I was building an aerobic engine. And it served me well once I started running. And that's a big reason, I think, why I found more success with the running. I was a walk-on at the University of Arizona. I was, John Parker in his book, Once a Runner, starts it off saying, every runner was a 4:34 high school miler. Sort of a tongue-in-cheek generic. And that's exactly what my high school actually set the record, but it was, not all that grand of a time. It did get me to the state championship, but I was not going to contend there. I knew that, and I didn't, but I had the experience. And so I walked into the track coach's office at the University of Arizona as a mid-year freshman. And hey, I'm Joe Schmo from Pennsylvania. I'd like to go out for the track team, and the coach, and my times weren't good enough for him to really do anything. And I didn't open his eyes necessarily, but he let me join the team for training runs. And the guys were very supportive and welcomed me. And so I cut my teeth and learned a lot and started running much higher mileage than I ever had before. And I was getting older, from 18 to 19, and those are your developmental years. So I just kept showing up and kept getting better, and ran a couple all-comer races that first year, and ran some times that when I was in high school thought were beyond my possible ability. So the coach was now looking for bodies. So he kind of welcomed me back, said, hey, I'll give you a locker, give you equipment and stuff, come out and run on the team, and let's see, maybe you can help us out. And at the end of the season, I was 7th man. 7 men earn varsity letters. So boom, I'm walking around campus as a freshman at the University of Arizona, big school, D1 athletic school, and I've got a varsity letter jacket, right? So that was a tremendous reward for me, and a reinforcement again to keep going. I stayed there for another year. Was finally beating some of the guys on the team who were on scholarship, but they had no scholarship money available. And I said, well, I need some help, or I'm probably going to transfer back east, which I did. It was 1969, height of the Vietnam War. In the transfer process, I was out of school for 3 months. I got reclassified 1A, available for draft. This is all new terminology to the youngsters who, the millennials who have never who were not around back then. And but nonetheless, you're classified 1A, means you're eligible for the draft, and within 30 days, they can't draft you for 30 days. The 31st day, I got my draft notice in the mail. I remember that to this day, because for us, we were scrambling like cockroaches when the light comes on. Nobody wanted to go to Vietnam. I was able to get into the Coast Guard. That was 4 years of military serviceable time. The Coast Guard's in the Department of Transportation at the time. Now it's Homeland Security, but they couldn't send me to a war zone. So I ended up, after my training and education down in the Washington, D.C. area, still in the Coast Guard. I discovered that they had a program there in the area, much like we have here in Boston, but on a much smaller scale. But at the time, it was pretty extensive. Every week, either a weekend or a midweek evening, they would have a 2-mile run for your life, it was called, and that was a national program. And then they would have another race. It could be anything out on the road, 6, 8, 10 miler, might be a 2-person relay on a track, just different creative stuff. And then those things through the summer, fall, were building toward the Washington Birthday Marathon in February of the following year of 1971. And so I was, kind of swept away in that whole culture, and that led me to prepare for and run my first marathon in 71, the Washington Birthday Marathon. The way it really benefited me was Washington Birthday. It was a 3-day weekend in DC. There was nothing going on sports-wise necessarily. The Bullets, I guess, the basketball team was playing, but nothing was happening. So all the officers at Coast Guard headquarters over in DC, I was in Alexandria, Virginia, actually, is where I was stationed. So the headquarters people, get up Monday morning and open up their Washington Post, they're to have the day off. And on the sports page, the front page of the sports section was Coast Guardsman wins Washington Birthday Marathon. Again, because they had nothing else to cover, probably. So that got their attention. They invited me over to headquarters. I spent the whole day chatting with the guys who were my age, but who were Coast Guard Academy grads and now stationed at headquarters in DC. They all wanted to know about my training, and we chit-chatted about all of that. So by the time I left that day, they put my papers in what they call special services. And they said, look, if you continue to run and represent the Coast Guard, we'll make sure that you can be stationed anywhere you want to do your training and whatnot. So that was a big feather in the cap. So I stayed right there in DC because I was having a great time, enjoying it. My running was still evolving, and I was living off base by then. I had my network of friendships and whatnot. So anyway, I had not yet met the Georgetown people. That came in the following years, but while I was still in the Coast Guard. And so yeah, I ran Boston 72 and 73 also in the Coast Guard.
So when you ran in 1971 in DC, you win this thing. Had you set your sights on Boston? I mean, before the race, or was it not until you won it to then realize I've got a pretty good shot to place pretty high based on the times I'm seeing in Boston?
Yeah, no, I was thinking, as I reflect back, we were all thinking Boston. The guys I ran with and were training with now was a small group of guys I had gotten to know. We would train together, and some of them were Boston Marathon vets. They had run before. So I was planning to come up and run Boston that year. But my goal, I remember my first goal when I sent in my application to Jock Semple. I didn't know Jock at the time, of course, but sent it in. I don't know if it was 25, maybe $1 or $2, I think, to enter. And I remember thinking, I'm running pretty well here. Maybe I can finish in the top 100. That was my first thought. And then as things went on and I was running races through the fall in preparation for that first Washington birthday marathon, I started thinking, gee, maybe I could get in the top 50 at Boston. Just kind of looking at times and guessing what time I might be able to run based on what results had been. And then after, running and winning that race in February, and 230 was kind of a hallmark number. I think the qualifying standards for the Olympic trials in 72, the next year, which I was not really aware of at the time, not privy to, ended up being 220, low 220s, maybe 220 for the A standard even then. But regardless,
223 for the B standard or something like that.
Yes, yeah. So I'm thinking, I'm going to maybe after winning in February, who knows, maybe top 20, something like that. And I can't remember when I met Jeff Galloway. I was training with a guy in the Air Force by the name of Ken Meisner, and he was a member of the Florida Track Club and a good friend of Jeff Galloway's. So I either met Jeff before or I knew of him because Ken would talk about him. And anyway, we ended up running most of that 71 Boston Marathon together. And it was, he finished 11th. I finished 12th right behind him. Of course, the next year he went on and made the Olympic team. I was still back in DC trying to figure it all out. But it all went very well, and I was pleasantly surprised.
And I know that in 72 and in 73, you ran Boston. You didn't have great races necessarily, but you did get to know the course a little bit better. You knew the tangents a little better. You knew the topography a little bit better, and all that experience counts. But then you go into 76 and your expectations are at a certain level. Then you've got a myriad of different things to contend with. Top of the list is the heat. But bring us to 76, if you will, and sort of that morning. I mean, you're going for your Olympic qualifier, but you had already raced twice in 76 in a marathon before you even came to Boston, right?
Yes, yeah. Well, I think the big factor was what happened from after my 73 Boston Marathon. I got out of the Coast Guard that same month in April of 73 and matriculated to Georgetown there in DC. I had gotten to know the Georgetown runners and the coaches and whatnot. I still had NCAA eligibility. So I finally got the college scholarship for running that I had, that was a dream goal of mine from all the way from high school. So there I am now I'm at Georgetown, but now I'm on the track and running cross country again. So I have 3 years of speed training, basically, for track, indoor and outdoor track and cross country. So I would go out on weekends where we didn't have races and do long runs because I had a marathoner's mindset. But my focus was certainly on the shorter stuff, everything from, running 800 meters or 1,000 meters in the indoor for training purposes. Focus was on the 3 mile, which is a 5K now, but back then we ran statute distances, 3 mile and 6 mile on the track. And that was my focus. So 3 years of speed training on top of the endurance I had built through marathoning when I was in the Coast Guard, it was a nice combination. So by the time I get ready for 76, I was a 5th-year senior at Georgetown. I was just finishing up. My NCAA eligibility had expired for outdoors. So I knew that I was now going, and I was going to be graduating that spring anyway. So my goal was, okay, time to go back to the roads, go back to the marathon. 76 was an Olympic year. It was just a natural progression to start training for the marathon, get qualified for the trials, and go to the trials and see if I could possibly make the team. We knew it was a stacked deck. The American runners coming to the running in the trials was Frank Shorter, who was defending Olympic champion, and Bill Rogers had set the American record at Boston just the year before in 75. So, all the other American marathoners knew that those two guys were probably shoo-ins for making the team if they were healthy, and who was going to make the third. There were a lot of other great runners in the field. So I knew it was a long shot for me, and I hadn't run marathons for 3 years. So those 2 marathons you mentioned, I ran one in January and one again in March, trying to get my qualifier in because the trials were in June, and I didn't want to have to run Boston in April and think that I'd have enough time to fully recover and be poised to take a good shot at getting that 3rd spot in the 76 trials. But that was my whole mindset. So in January, again, a multitude of things sort of conspired. I didn't get my qualifying time. It wasn't because I wasn't fit enough. It was a solo race. Other guys who were going to show up didn't. And I flew to North Carolina, ran this race, and it was an out and back into a 20-mile-an-hour headwind the whole way. So, and the tailwind on the way out pushed me to go faster than I should have, all of that. Right? So that went south. So in March, I went up to Long Island to run the Earth Day Marathon, actually, get my qualifier in. Same thing, 50-mile-an-hour winds on the whole East Coast. So it was a conspiracy, right? So I ran within 10, 12 miles. We were close to being on pace, but we were working a lot harder than we needed to sustain it. And I just had a sense there's no way this is going to happen without really beating me up. So I was going to drop out. The guy I was running with turned out to have been my Georgetown roommate and teammate, but he had already graduated and he was from Long Island. So he was there. It wasn't by plan. I just ran into him there. So we ran, and we both had the same goal, qualifying for the trials. He went on and won the race. I can't remember now if he actually got his qualifying time. He may have got the B standard at 2:23, but I don't think he did. So anyway, I dropped out at 18, knowing that I just treat this as a hard training run. And I had another month before Boston. So yes, coming to Boston now in 76, I was poised for a good race. I was in the best shape of my life. As you said, I knew the course from having run it in 71, 2, and 3. But it was an interesting dynamic because there still were not official water stops there, not official clocks. You didn't know where you were vis-a-vis time anywhere on the course. And we didn't have digital watches then. They were just coming out at the time. So you could wear an analog watch or one of the cumbersome digital watches with tiny little red LED numbers on them, and the watch weighed 5 ounces or something, a little metal. Yes. Exactly right. Yes. Yeah. So it looked like that, but it was as heavy as that one looks. Anyway, so you didn't know where you were vis-a-vis time, and I needed a sub 220. I knew I was supremely confident I was in well under 220 on a good day, on good weather day, and I have a good race. So I had all that confidence going in. Turned out, of course, to be brutally hot the whole weekend. We saw the whole week before the weather forecast for the following weekend, and I was in DC. It was hot down there, but it was this weather was coming in for the entire Northeast. And so we knew it was going to be hot. So I'm coming up, I'm in good spirits. I feel great. I'm in super shape, and it's hot, but I'm thinking I'm probably in maybe 215, 216 shape on a good day. I can, so I have a 4-minute cushion to 220, and then another 3-minute cushion to make the B standard, right? If the weather really slows us down that much, it's going to likely slow most of us down pretty much comparably. So, so I figure at worst case scenario, I'll make the B standard. The only difference was you could go to the trials, but the U.S. Olympic Committee wouldn't pay your way if you did not make the A standard. And so I wasn't worried about that. I'll figure out a way to get out to Eugene, Oregon to run the trials. There was a symbolic aspect of still wanting to run under 220. And that was if I thought I was going to be contend for that third spot or anywhere on the team, that I had to come in with a qualifier under 220 anyway. You know, I limped in with a 222. I'm like one of the stage hands, so to speak. So I did want a faster time. Turns out I ran 220 and 19 seconds. But the bigger, and just missed it. So sure enough, I had to pay my own way. The Olympic Committee wouldn't give me a penny to go out there. Tom Derderian's done a very nice job of advocating for me that on all of that, even to today, says the U.S. Olympic Committee screwed up and they really should have paid my way. I completely agree. Regardless,
Boston Marathon champion did not.
Yeah, exactly. So
Wild.
whatever, you know, what are you going to do? So, but the bigger issue here, I think that is applicable to everybody who may be watching here and be running the marathon here in Boston as a virtual one in September or any other marathons, was that, and I had thought about this a lot through the course of my competitive career. And everybody experiences what competition anxiety can do to you. You prepare, you train for it, and then all of a sudden you start getting closer and closer to the race. You know, as Paul Simon once sang, the nearer your destination, the more you slip sliding away, right? And so we get closer and closer. 2 weeks out, we're feeling comfortable, we're feeling pretty good if things have gone well. I might have a little bit of doubt if things haven't gone perfectly, but as we get closer and closer, you know, we have a high level, as I mentioned before, kind of a high level goal to go beyond where we've ever been before. And the doubt starts to creep in, the fear, all of that. We do this, you know, beat up on ourselves mentally sometimes with doubt and fear. And, but that didn't happen at Boston at all. And in large part because my primary goal was now not how I'm going to do against the other runners, where I'm going to place, which is where we typically run as competitive runners. We're thinking place, but now I'm thinking time. My primary goal was to get my Olympic trials qualifying time. Where I placed in the race was secondary to me. It was not unimportant, and I knew I had to be in the top 10, again, because we had no watches, no clocks out there. I had looked at previous year's results and said, anything in the top 10 will get me under my 220 on a good weather day. Now, it wasn't a good weather day, but nonetheless, I had now locked into finishing somewhere in the top 10 and using that to pull me down into my qualifying time. As such, all the competitors in the race now were now my allies mentally to me. You know, the faster they ran, the faster I was likely to run. So they were no longer now my competitors. They were my allies in my mind. And it changed the entire dynamic of the race from a competitive standpoint. I now had absolutely no competitive anxiety. I was so relaxed and so comfortable in my skin and in that race that, you know, and I let the leaders go and I didn't reel them back in. I didn't move into the top 10 until Wellesley, the 13-mile mark. Once I was there, I felt like I hadn't even started to work. I was running under garden hoses and staying wet and keep the heat from beating up. It was 96 degrees at the start, insane. So I was staying as cool as I could, literally and figuratively. And once I moved into the top 10 in Wellesley, I said, okay, top 10, my job's done. Wherever I finish in the top 10 is secondary again. My goal is to stay cool, stay relaxed here. There's still a lot of running to do. And within the next 4 miles, I'd moved into 4th place and all of a sudden running through past the 17-mile mark, approaching the Newton Firehouse at 17 plus. I'm passing the 2nd and 3rd place runners. Billy Squires, who I knew of but had not yet met, had run out on the road there by Newton Wellesley Hospital, handed me some ice cubes, said, here, rub these on your arms. And so, all right, that's what I was doing. Thanks, Bill. And I had a little bit of ice cubes left as I caught those 2nd and 3rd place runners. Mario Cuevas of Mexico finished 2nd, and Jose de Jesus, who finished 3rd behind me. They were there training for Montreal and preparing. This was part of their they didn't know it was going to be hot necessarily, but they were prepared to run in the heat because they had been training in their home countries. And they were there also staying on the East Coast, getting ready to run the Montreal games later that, several months down the line. Regardless, so I remember handing one of them some ice cubes thinking, in part being, an honest gesture of magnanimity an enemy. And the other part was the competitive aspect that was still resident in my experience. Here, you guys need this a little more than I do. So I'm done with that. And so anyway, I passed them by. They didn't, meet my challenge, go with me at all. And turned the corner at the firehouse, and lo and behold, there's Richard Mabuza, who had been leading the race for the entire 18 miles. And he was from Swaziland. He'd run 2:12 in the previous year or two, so he was a legitimate contender from the get-go. And the photographers all thought, no one's going to catch him. It's hot. He's leading. He looks very comfortable. But sure enough, he had gone out too fast, and the heat finally got to him, and he was in the process of wilting by the time I caught up to him.
Had you seen him before the firehouse, or was it when you turned that you then got the leader in sight?
I had seen him coming through Wellesley. As I said, once I moved into the top 10, there's a big, long stretch that goes downhill and back up where you can see almost a half mile out in front of you. And I didn't know who it was, but I could see the other runners kind of strung out there. Not sufficiently to be able to count them, but I believe there was a BA official there or somebody yelled, "You're in 10th place." That was how I remember knowing that I was in 10th place in Wellesley. It wasn't that I was counting them. But as I looked ahead, I said, okay, there's 9 guys out there kind of strung out, in singles or doubles running. They had all spread out. So, but I didn't know specifically who the leader was and I didn't even know until I literally was passing him. And I didn't know who he was personally, of course, but I sort of recognized he was one of the African runners, the few African runners who were in the race who were strong potential contenders. The Kenyans and the Ethiopians had not yet shown up in the marathoning world as we know it now. That didn't happen for another 10 years. But regardless, when I went by him, I was on the opposite side of the road. I was running the tangent and he was still running the wide side. So I knew that from that alone that he must be in trouble. He's not thinking clearly.
And this is in Newton, where it is quite windy. I mean, there's some ups and downs, yes, but there are lefts and rights. And as it meanders, you can really save yourself some distance by running the tangents, which is where you had them.
Yeah. I mean, you have to be alert to that and be paying attention. If you just stay on the right side of the road through there, you're going to add whatever, however many steps, could add up to hundreds of yards, and surely would through the course of the entire marathon if you weren't running the tangent. The course is measured.
You had been doing some meandering too to get.
I'm sorry?
You had been doing some meandering too to get under this hose or get under that hose.
Oh yes, yeah. I jokingly say I probably ran 27 miles. I literally ran off the road. I ran into people's yards.
Hey, what happened with the bucket?
Oh, you remember that? Oh God, there was a whole bucket of water there. I mean, a big pail. And I'm thinking, I need that. So I thought my vision when I saw it ahead of me was, wow, I can just grab this thing, swoop it up and pour it on my head as I run. I'm not even going to have to slow down for it. Well, it was full of water. Water weighs 8 pounds a gallon, and there were 8 gallons in this thing. So it almost took my shoulder, pulled my shoulder out of place, boom, and I dropped the whole thing. I got nothing out of it. And I realized, wow, that was pretty stupid. What was I thinking? So I survived that little mishap. But there were kids out there. There's one photograph of me, and I just passed Mabuza and just cresting the hill there, coming close to the 18-mile mark. And there was one shot taken from one of the photographers on the bus or on the photography truck. It's a black and white, and there's a little girl who was running out. She's right in the middle of Comm Ave. She's in full stride. She's reaching out. She has a slice of orange in her hand, and she's reaching out completely. And I am likewise in full stride, reaching over, trying to grab it. It's like the touch, right? And it's a beautiful photograph, one of the best I have of that race. And so we were getting help from the people who were along the course with their garden hoses, the little kids coming out with cups of water and oranges and whatnot. But that was pretty much it. Regardless, again, and now by the time I took the lead, I don't know if you remember, because we were running under these fountains of hoses, my number I had cut it down into 2 single digits, 1 and 4. My number was 14, which interestingly enough, was Bill Rogers' bib number the year before when he won. So, and I think the number 14 has been worn by several other winners. I have to do some research to confirm that. But regardless, so I had that on. I cut it down so I didn't have this big air block. And that was just one of the silly things that we runners used to do as well. And so with all the water, it had curled up. So you couldn't see my bib number at all. It was like it was gone. And so all I had on my shirt was Georgetown. So when I took the lead, the guys in the photography truck, all the photographers, a lot of them had run out of film. I used to say they were having a beer party on that thing, but Jeff Johnson, who was one of the photographers, assured me recently there was no beer on that truck. And I said, well, you guys kind of blew it then. But they were passing around their sodas or whatever. It was hot, so they had coolers of drinks for themselves. And that was happening, and a number of them had already run out of film. So, or had put their cameras away thinking Mabuza was going to win it. So a lot of the photos I've seen were taken actually by Jeff Johnson, and he was also the one who identified me, went down the list in the newspaper and saw the Georgetown affiliation, just 14 numbers down from the number 1 seed, whoever that was. And
just to go back to this, no, people didn't know who you were. I mean, your bib number is gone.
Right.
You're not in the lead for a while. And then all of a sudden you are in the lead, and the whole media crew is scrambling and trying to figure out who you are, right? So he's going down and eventually figures it out. I mean, there's no internet. This is the Wild West. There's no water. There's no internet. There's no crowd control. So someone just figured it out. Weren't they asking you to like identify yourself?
Oh, they were. Absolutely, they were. Who are you? All the guys, the BA officials on the bus couldn't communicate with me, but the photographers were on the back of a pickup truck. There was scaffolding built around the back of a pickup truck. And so they were all there and had open air access to take the photographers, the photographs. And so they were right literally in front of me, and they were driving down the center of the road. So they would tell the driver, slow down so they could get very close. And I haven't seen, again, a lot of those photographs if they were taking them. But there were times when, again, the road turned. So I wanted to run across the road following the tangent, and they were there. I'd have to ask them to speed up. And they were asking me, who are you? Who are you? What's your name? And I wouldn't tell them. It was all of a sudden, it was, again, I felt so good. I wasn't tired at all. I was just I was on cruise control. And now it's dawning on me, of course, once I moved into 4th place, it started really hitting me. Wow, this is significant. I'm going to finish. I might win this thing. And so my mind all of a sudden starts turning. And there were occasions when I would literally get giddy. When I was running along and they were trying to figure out who I was, I wouldn't tell them. One of them, it was Jeff Johnson again, who was the first employee of Nike. Some people know that, having read some of the stories on Nike. So it was Jeff Johnson, great guy, and an amateur photographer. He still does a lot of photography and coaches. Anyway, he saw Georgetown on my singlet, and that the runner I mentioned earlier, Justin Gubbins, who I ran the Earth Day Marathon with, or part of it, the month before, lived on Long Island, had already graduated from Georgetown. He was known up and down the East Coast in New England for being a very good road runner and marathoner. So they thought I was Justin Gubbins. Little did they know we had been teammates and roommates at Georgetown. But so that I had run a marathon with him just the month before, or part of one. He went on and won it. So I got a chuckle out of that, and I remember things starting to chuckle. Justin would get a kick out of them thinking that I was him, but I said, no, you're close. But I wouldn't tell them who I was. And then finally, again, as I said, Jeff Johnson went down the list. You only had to get down number 14 to find a Georgetown Affiliation. So, oh, Jack Fultz, you're Jack Fultz. Who are you? Yeah, Jack, we know your name, but who are you? As a matter of fact, there was one of I remember seeing after the next day, one of the captions in one of the newspapers, and people wonderfully sent me, they clipped out the newspaper reports of the race from, newspapers across the country. It was wonderful. They would send them to my name and Arlington, Virginia, right? That was all they knew of where I was. And the post office would get them to me. But it would say, one of the captions was, who is that guy? So yeah, I was not known in marathoning circles. I was known in the collegiate circles now, up and down the East Coast a little bit. I had run and I qualified. Yeah. We'd gone to nationals and cross country and indoors on the relay and whatnot. I never achieved the level of success I had hoped to collegiately on the track, but that's why everything ended up really getting consummated in my win at Boston '76 because Georgetown, given, when a college gives an athlete a scholarship, they're hoping to get some recognition out of that, right? Stability for the school, basically, in one way or another. And so it all kind of came in one big sweet package, winning Boston. The dean of the Foreign Service School at Georgetown happened to be in Japan at the time, and he was a jogger himself, so he'd come down. He knew the guys on the team. We knew him, wonderful guy, and he was very supportive of us. He was in Japan at the times, and so he said he woke up the next morning and he saw Georgetown on the back cover of the Japan Times newspaper. And he was just gaga. He sent it to the president of the university, of course, they made a big fandango about it, as you can understand they would.
Mhm.
So I felt like I finally earned my scholarship, my 3 years of scholarship money in that one fell swoop. So, which was kind of nice. And to this day, they invited me into the Hall of Fame 20 years later. And so still recognized for that. So it's interesting to, it certainly changed my life in so many ways,
Yeah.
of course. And to this day, the things I do are predicated on that,
Right.
infamous hot day.
There's a moment though where okay, now you've forgotten about the time because now you're kind of back again focused on your competitors. Once you realize you've passed all of them,
Right.
you are feeling good. You're coming down into Cleveland Circle at mile 22, and
Right.
something just feels off for a second, right?
Oh yeah, good memory. Yeah, my calves started to cramp, and I had a moment of panic. Thought, oh my God, no! And the rest of everything feels good, and now my calves start to go. And if they go, you're dead in the water, And so I had, again, that brief moment of panic, thinking, oh no, if someone's been tracking me through the field just like I have been doing with others, I'm dead meat. If my calves don't recover, I'm dead meat. And the thought that immediately followed that was, hey, I'm still here to get my qualifying time. I'm running the race of my life. If somebody runs a better race and comes by me and beats me, as long as I get my qualifying time, I can live with that.
Okay.
It's like in golf parlance, if I miss the shot, I miss the shot, as long as it's not because I did something wrong, right? And somebody outperforms me, they'll deserve the victory, and I'll come back and take another shot because now I know I can contend. All right. And just that thought alone enabled me to slow down with a peace of mind, to know that I'm still running well, and but I can't do anything foolish now. I still had 4 miles to go, which is a long way at the end of the marathon. So I backed off, I slowed down a little bit, and then pretty quickly then got to the downhill coming into Cleveland Circle. And with that downhill, you use your calves a lot less than climbing or trying to maintain a good bouncy pace on even level ground. So my calves relaxed, but by the combination of the downhill and slowing down a little bit. And by the time I got down on Beacon Street and started to run again, my calves had relaxed, and boom, I totally forgot about them. And now all of a sudden I'm running again. I'm feeling good once again. People are still passing out water. There are no more garden hoses because along Comm Ave, the residents along there, the townhouses, they don't have the luxury of having garden hoses. So, but it had cooled down. The temperature had dropped to 78 degrees. And it was dry air. It was and I remember people yelling, there's a sea breeze coming, because they're listening to the broadcast on the radio. And they had been talking about this. Wow, there's a big sea breeze coming in off the water from Boston all the way out to the hills near Boston College in Newton. And boom, I can't say I have very specific memory of that, but certainly can remember that all of a sudden there was this cooling effect. And while 78 degrees, say 80 degrees is still warm, in a relative sense, the air was much drier, and it was a bit of a breeze that I was running into, and had a very cooling effect with whatever water I was putting on me. So once again, having not gotten into trouble with the heat yet, that helped tremendously to not then endure, really suffer. Who knows? Had that not happened, I probably would have had to slow down. So too would have everybody else.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I ran the whole, people were yelling, there's no one in sight, no one in sight. I never had to look back, and just cruised in. I got to the finish, and it's like, wow, the race is over. Time to stop. And I never remember being in physical distress whatsoever. It was worse after they put me in the barber's chair for the post-race interview for an hour, and then I had to get up out of that. Then I realized, oh my God, I just ran a marathon.
Now, I got to ask you about 1977. You are the defending champ. You almost didn't come to Boston, then you ended up coming. And
right.
I mean, you don't seem like the kind of guy who gets stressed out very often, but I can only imagine the level of stress you had on the morning of the race when you take it away.
Oh, wow. Again, it's a long story. I'll try to condense it all. You're right. I was going to run a marathon in Rotorua, New Zealand. I'd never been to New Zealand. I wanted to get down there. And then I realized I owe it to myself to come back and defend at Boston. This may be the only chance I have to do that. Came back to Boston. The BAA didn't help athletes back then at all. We didn't have John Hancock as a sponsor. So, you know, if you want to come back as defending champion, we'd love to have you, but, you know, not going to get any assistance. So I came back in, I was staying with a friend who lived on Beacon Hill, parked my car, I thought legally, woke up Saturday morning of that marathon weekend, the car was gone, been towed. You know, when I found out it was cheaper to leave it in the towing lot than to pay for parking, I just left it there for the weekend. And then Monday morning, that friend was driving me out to the start. We got stuck in a traffic jam, got a late start. He showed up from his office Monday morning.
Yeah,
said,
but didn't he chose to drive the course and not like the Mass Pike or something?
Yes. I can't remember if we had to pick somebody up in Wellesley or why he made this decision. But anyway, so we're driving out the course and end up stuck in traffic in Wellesley. The race started at noon. It's another hot day. It ended up being, I think, in the low to mid 80s maybe for the race, or maybe high 70s, but warm by marathon standards. And it was sunny, and we had no AC in the car. We're sweating, and we're stuck in traffic jam. And all of a sudden, he pulls out in the passing lane, passes about 15 cars. Right? We're thinking they're all stuck at a traffic light. Turns out it was a funeral procession. And we got to the front, and the whole line of cars were turning left. Oh. So we couldn't get through. So we had to turn left, still in the oncoming lane, drive all the way around. Fortunately, they were pulling into a church or something there. So we only had to go a few blocks out of the way, but it obviously detained us. So by the time we got to Hopkinton, it's now close to 11:30, half hour before the start. And we pulled him up the race course and parked right where the starting line is now. Back then, it was, almost a quarter of a mile away around on Hayden Row. Mm-hmm. So we stopped there, and it was all congested and whatnot. I think somebody else in the car, my friend who was driving told somebody else in the car, here, go park the car somewhere. We have to go get Jack's bib number, which was at the high school. You didn't pick up your bib number on the weekend expo. That didn't exist back. A little bit of an expo did, was speaking stuff, but you could get your number at the start in Hopkinton. So we literally had to run, I don't know how, I think it's almost a mile to the school, right? So we shuffle across there in the heat, right? It's a 10-minute jog or something over to get the bib number. We got there. It's now 20 minutes of 12. Said, I'm here I need my bib number. What's your bib number? Number 1. They didn't know who I was. Oh, said, well, hey, Sam, where are the top bib numbers? Nobody knew where they were. Then somebody finally said, they took all the top 100 numbers that had not yet been picked up. They took them to the starting line for you guys who come late, can pick it up there. So had to jog back to the starting line. It's now 10 minutes of 12 for the start. Nobody can find the bib numbers, right? So I finished the race the year before without a bib number. Now I'm going to start as defending champion without a bib number. I was supposed to have bib number 1. And, I was in pretty good shape, but not the best shape. I wasn't in as good a shape as I was the year before. So I wasn't sure what was going to happen. But I now had all the expectations, responsibilities to try to contend again. I was going to need all the help I could get, with the cheering crowd cheering for number 1. Well, I never got it. I never got my bib number. I started the race. I wrote, literally, somebody had a magic marker. It was a red magic marker on my white shirt, put bib number. I just put a big number 1, right? And of course, the first bucket of water I hit, or the first cup of water, made it all bleed. So I had all this red match all over and no number. I ran the whole race unidentified. They didn't know who I was. As I said, I got in over my head in the middle of the race. I had to back off, let them go. I finally salvaged the top 10 finish, ran into 9th place through Kenmore Square. And that to me was, okay, I salvaged the top 10 finish. It wasn't what I wanted. I ran within 30 seconds of my winning time. But I kind of felt okay. But when I finished the race, the official, I didn't have a bib number, so they didn't know who I was. They didn't recognize me. No. Who is this guy? Get him out of here. They thought I was the original Rosie Ruiz. So, so I'm trying to convince them of who I am. Finally, the guys who finished right behind me said, no, 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 he was with us for, we saw him through the last 6 miles anyway. He ran the whole race. And he said, okay, well, what was your bib number? And I'm thinking, if they don't know if they don't recognize me and they're not sure I really ran the whole race, they're certainly not going to believe my bib number was number 1. Sure enough, I said, sheepishly, number 1. Get him out of here. They really thought I was just a bandit who was trying to pull the wool over their eyes or something, and now being a smart ass about it. So anyway, somehow they were finally convinced, and maybe one of them finally said, oh, it's Jack. Hey, Jack, didn't recognize you. Oh, really? So that, the compendium of stories, around that race, there are a lot of other crazy things that happened during the process. And anyway, so they recognized me for that. I salvaged it, came back the next year. Again, I know we're running out of time. 78 was perfect conditions. It was everything. I was in the best shape of my life. We had a stellar field. The entire U.S. Olympic team from 76 was there. Rogers, Shorter, Don Cardong, and the rest of the top American field. It was a strong international field, the whole thing. Weather conditions were absolutely perfect. And boom, I hit it, put it on the screws, as the golfers say, and ran the race of my life again. And
211.
211, yeah, 211. They had asked me before, the press was saying, Jack, okay, you're back for your 3rd shot here. What do you think you can run? My PR was the 220. I had run the year 2 years earlier, and I said, I was reluctant to give them a number. And they kept pressing. Okay, look, I'm in the best shape of my life. I've been doing workouts I just can't believe. Ran some times that I feel real good about. Ran a 29-minute 10K or something on the roads, but won the race and was very comfortable. And I said, if I have a good race and the weather stays the way it is, I think I can run 212. And then, boom, that opened some eyes. Really? You're talking an 8-minute PR here. I said, well, you asked me, and I'm just saying, we'll see what happens. And I would have run 210 had I ran 211.17. I got stuck behind the press bus with 4 miles to go. And back then, running down Beacon, the last 4 miles were like what you see in the Tour de France and the mountain stages, single file, the spectators squeezed in, literally not room for a vehicle to go through, let alone runners, more than single file. And that's what that race was like. So the bus got literally stuck. I was running with Jeff Wells, who finished 2 seconds behind Bill Rogers that year. So with 4 miles to go. And Jeff made a move on me. Again, we were running, or we didn't know exactly what pace we were running. We knew we were close to 5-minute pace. He put a nice move on me and got 20 yards ahead of me. And I thought, I'm not ready to go with him, but I'll have to reel him in down Beacon Street. And the bus then pulled up, went past me, never got past Jeff before we get down onto Beacon Street, and it got stuck in the crowd. Boom. I literally running behind the bus, big cloud of blue smoke that I'm sucking down. But he's moving along about my pace, which is, 12 miles an hour for a runner is pretty quick. 12 miles for a bus is pretty slow. So finally he slows down even more, and I'm running, turn sideways between the bus and the spectators. They're all jumping out of the way, and I inch past the bus, get out in front of it. Now I'm running unmolested, and other than the crowd, but they're not molesting. There's still enough room to run there, but it's very tight. Another quarter of a mile, half mile, the bus finally breaks free from the spectators, catches up to me, and they're trying to get to the next checkpoint at the 25-mile mark before the lead runners do, because it's filled with BA officials, and that's what they have done heretofore. And so the bus is honking me out of the way. I move out of the way. He goes by me, another half mile. He's stuck in the crowd again. I'm stuck behind the bus. Same thing over again. I squeeze by him a second time. Now I'm in front of him. He comes by again. He's honking. I flip him off. I'm not getting out of the way this time because I don't want to get stuck behind you again. Right. Finally, he was so persistent, I had to move out of the way. I did. He went by me. And fortunately, he didn't get stuck again. But once we got to Audubon Circle, which is a widening in the road just before you go over the overpass into Kenmore Square with a mile to go, the bus is sitting there in the middle of the road. Not because of people. He's just sitting there. I guess the bus driver wasn't really sure where to pull over to let the BA officials off the bus. So I'm passing him on the right-hand side, again, trying to run the tangent, knowing that the road turns to the right. through Kenmore Square. So I pass him on the right this time. He starts to accelerate right as I get beside him. And he's going right, we're right beside each other. I'm banging on the side of the bus just to let him know I'm there, trying to keep my mind in the race. I didn't know exactly what place I was in. I had not been able to see the runners ahead of me. I knew I was probably in the top 5, 6, 7, whatever. But I'm banging on the side of the bus, boom, boom. Finally, we get right to the top of the hill. There, 25 miles or 1 mile to go. No, it's 25 mile mark. 1 mile to go is down by Kenmore Square. 1.2 miles to go. He stops. He's got me all the way over to the curb now, literally nowhere else to run. And I think there's enough room for me to edge around the front, and he opens the door. Boom, right in front of me. I have no idea. My old high school football skills, I guess. I turned sideways. I jumped. There was a guardsman standing, a National Guardsman or something for security, I guess, standing there sort of on his own. There weren't even that many spectators there, if I remember correctly. And I just turned and jumped between him and somehow ended up on the other side, didn't fall down, landed on my feet. And somebody, I don't remember the specific person, but somebody yelled, "That's third place in front of that group." And I looked up and there were 3 runners. It was Randy Thomas and Kevin Ryan. And I couldn't make them out. I didn't know specifically it was them at the time. And Asa Tikkanen from Finland. And so I just put my head down and started to go. I was still feeling pretty good and very good, actually. And I just, and Jeff Wells had already gone by them and was chasing down Rogers. Whether I had been able to hang on to him had it not been for the bus ordeals, hard to say. You know, I can only speculate. But I think at the very least he would have pulled me probably past those 3. Anyway, I got past Kevin and Randy through Kenmore Square, and I was up Hereford Street. I'm chasing Asa Tikkanen. I can reach out, almost grab him, and he's in 3rd place, and I know that now. And my legs start to buckle underneath me. I feel no pain. It's like trying to wiggle my ears, right? So I had to back off a little bit. Nowadays, you go up to the top to Boylston Street, turn left, and you have 600 meters down Boylston Street to chase somebody down. Back then, you didn't. You ran across Boylston Street, continued to climb a little bit, and then in front of the Prudential Center, which is now the Heinz Auditorium, built out over what was then called Ring Road. It was a little access road. And then it was a 200-meter little ski slope that shot down and finished right in front of the Prudential. And that was all I had. So I got to the top of that. Finally, I didn't have to lift my knees anymore. I just throw my legs out in front of me. I'm doing that, wailing down, closing on Asa, and I just ran out of race. He beat me by a second and collapsed over the finish line. I jumped over top of him. I remember I'm looking back to see who actually won. It's not knowing. And turns out, you know, Bill Rogers had won. That was his second win. And Jeff Wells was 2 seconds behind him, and Asa and I were now another minute behind them. Wow. But anyway, so that's, you know, the quickest I can tell this story now. But it was, you know, and I was so excited. I didn't know I didn't know my time for another hour. We were up on top of the crew, you know, recovering and chit-chatting with everybody, commiserating, waiting for the little award ceremony they had up there. And somebody came in and literally wrote on a chalkboard. I was standing there talking with Kenny Moore, whose PR had been 2:11, and he held the American record with his 2:11 from earlier in the 70s. And boom, I think my finishing time, 2:11:17, I think it superseded his time by about 2 seconds or something. You know? But anyway, I was in a new class of marathoner now, top 20 in the world, the whole thing. And for the next year or 2 years, I thought, you know, my best times are still ahead of me. Mm-hmm. But that never happened. I moved up here the next year. I got injured just before Boston. I thought I was definitely ready to contend again in '79. And 6 weeks before the race, I cracked my tibia, stress fracture, and took me out of the race. I never got to run it. 80 was because of the boycott. I chose not to go to the trials. By virtue of that, I started rushing my training to get ready for Boston in April, and it was just trying to do too much too soon. I got injured. I don't even think I didn't run Boston that year. Sure. Anyway, so I never did run faster than that 2:11. I always thought I could, but as it should be, you know, we all have to believe that we could have done better than what we ever did.
Well, Certainly
Yeah.
quite a resume that you put together there for 10 plus years, and you're still contributing greatly to the sport, certainly with Dana-Farber and through other groups and programs that you coach that we would need another hour just to talk through all of that. But Jack Fultz, thanks for joining us here at the Boston Marathon Expo main stage. Do some shopping, check out some stuff while you're here.
Absolutely,
And
I will. And I encourage everybody else to do the same thing, and sort of pretend it's a virtual is virtual, and use your imagination, not only in terms of your marathon, if you're going to be running the virtual marathon, but certainly with regards to the expo. If you've been here before, you know what that's like. Kind of wrap yourself in that experience, and take a vacation from the rigors of what the pandemic is doing to our lives. And I'm with you completely, TK.